Call to order the City Council regular meeting for the City of Wyoming, Minnesota, December 20th, 2022. Let the record reflect, we do have a quorum. Member Luger, Member Onstad, Member Yeager, and Mayor Iverson are present. Member Schilling is not. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next on our agenda is the open forum. Can everybody hear us? Okay, thank you. Is an opportunity for members of the public to address the City Council on items that may or may not be on the current agenda. Items requiring council action may be deferred to staff or boards and commissions for research and future council agendas if appropriate. You will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask that you conduct yourself in a professional, courteous manner and refrain from the use of profanity. Failure to abide by this policy may result in the loss of your privilege to speak. Mr. Linwood had given me the sign-up sheet, and we have 4 people who'd like to come up and speak during public forum. So do we have Todd and Nancy Brockman? Would you like to come up? Yep, you can.
It's actually under the new business
Y- Do you want to? Do we want to do that?
We can have them do it at that time. If
Okay.
they don't have anything that's just other than that, unless they have something for open forum.
Okay. Okay. Anybody have for open forum that's not regarding 12 and 13? Nope. Somebody could smile. There we go. Thank you. All right. So we'll wait until then for that, for people to speak at that point in time. We're going to move on to number 1, approval of minutes. Consider approving the minutes of the regular meeting of the Wyoming, Minnesota City Council for December 6, 2022. If there are no comments or questions, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve by Member Luger. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Onstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 2, consider approving the minutes of the work session meeting of the Wyoming, Minnesota City Council for December 13th, 2022. If there are no questions or comments, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by Member Luker. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Onstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Consent agenda number 3, 4. 3 and 4. Is there anybody who wishes to pull an item from the consent agenda?
Pull number 4, please.
We'll pull number 4. Should we, you know what, are you guys okay with just approving both of them at the same time? 3 and 4? After we talk about 4?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, you're good with that? Okay, so we're gonna pull number 4, but we'll vote on 3 and 4 at the same time. So, Member Yeager,
Okay.
number 4 is a resolution number 2212-128, a resolution approving the Wyoming Fire Relief Association request. Go ahead.
Okay, so the benefit level has been increasing $500 a year for the past few years. It's now at $4,500. I was going to ask, since if that number is going to be capped, or maybe in a year be capped, because it appears that at the current schedule of increases, like found on page 31, a deficit's going to start appearing about 2026.
Sure. It's a good question. So the current benefit level is $4,000. You're right, the fire relief since 2019 has been doing $5 to $100 increments as part of their benefit level for that fire relief pension. Just so everyone knows that the Fire Relief Association is a separate 501c3 from the fire department, just for the record and for the people in attendance tonight. We do these evaluations on an annual basis, and I think council, if you go back in some of these, you can see Councilmember Yeager is correct. It is in this benefit level as far as right now the evaluation of the pension fund. This is why we make this an annual exercise. So in 2022, 2023, and 2024, based on that $500 increase, there is no required municipal contribution from the city. The only municipal contribution the city does right now is $200 a firefighter. In 2026, based on that projected accrued liability and their projected assets, there would be a $26,000 contribution from the city of Wyoming. What has happened in the past when we have done these projections, as the projected assets keep going up and the actual investment account for the fire relief continues to grow. So what you see often is these numbers then, once we get into, we'll do an evaluation next year too if there is a request from the fire relief. If we can handle that, we do that obviously to try to sit there and minimize any potential liability from this to the city. We watch current market conditions. If there was an extreme change in the market, we would want to be available to do that evaluation of the pension. So really, I don't necessarily know. I can't speak for the fire relief if there is a quote-unquote cap that they are looking at. I think this is a part of their retention and is part of their attraction to the department to have this pension level. As many cities do that. They operate on different ways. Some have a very large pension with wage. Some have a smaller wage with an incredibly large pension. So it just really depends upon how they act. Right now, I think that has been the continued effort from that relief to build that projected asset within the fire relief and to continue those $500 increases. I would anticipate, based on some of the meetings that I've attended at the fire relief, that's what they will continue to do, but certainly we will continue to evaluate this year by year. And if there does come a point where we look at that required contribution that it actually is in that year, we'll have to have further discussion with the council. I don't want to speak for the council, but it's been my understanding that we're not interested in a municipal contribution at this time to the fund. So we would continue to evaluate it year by year. But at this point in time, I guess your original question, council member, in regard, is there a cap? Not aware of that they've just continued to raise that $500 annually.
Because I said we're gonna run into a wall sooner or later with it, and
Potentially, but also I think in 19 there was a projected wall, I think in this year. So, and as the fund grows,
Okay.
continues to grow, they may avoid it, but certainly we'll continue to do the analysis every year because we want to make sure that we're not opening the city up to any liability or contribution.
okay, fine.
All right. Anybody else have questions with that before we vote on 3 and 4? No?
No.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve consent agenda number 3 and number 4. Do we have a motion to approve? Member Yeager, do you want
Oh,
to make
yeah,
that motion?
fine.
Thank you. Member Yeager makes the first. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Luger. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on the agenda are acknowledgement, receipts of reports of officer boards, commissions, and department heads. Does anybody wish to pull any report for further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to communication. Number 10, the Chisago Lakes Forest Lake Water District Sunrise River 61 Wetland Enhancement Project construction. Did you want to speak about that, or just if we have questions?
I think this is more informational for the council to let you know that that project is commencing. I know that the watershed has continued to advertise that. We actually did it as a staff today, receive a memo from the project coordinator that they will break ground on that project on January 3rd of this upcoming year. So if you see activity there, just to know that it is actually the watershed that is conducting it.
Okay, thank you. And then number 11 is 2023 East Viking Boulevard Project 5481, East Viking Boulevard, Gadsell parcel. We've all read that. Does anybody have any questions on that you need to ask staff? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Number 12, to consider resolution 2212-129, a resolution approving a conditional use permit for the master plan of a planned unit development known as a PUD, C22-003, Katie's Glen location, Goodview Avenue between 255th and 258th Street. Application Proboda, sorry if I didn't say that correctly, Enterprises Property ID number 21.10140.00. Mr. Weck, are you starting with us?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor and council members, Mr. Sorry.
Sorry, I got you started with that, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So with the PowerPoint presentation of Katie's Glen is a residential development. If you move on. So site location, as Mayor stated, is on Goodview Avenue between 255th and 258th Street. Currently, it's a vacant lot wooded with some wetland area on it. They're requesting preliminary plat and a CUP for the planned unit development overlay and the master plan of the development. Next slide. It's currently zoned R3. The zoning around it is R1. Would make your minimum lot size on the other side of Goodview Avenue is also R3. This property was annexed into Wyoming before the orderly annexation agreement with Wyoming Township. Potentially could have been developed back then. Next slide. This is a view of the preliminary plat. There's about 1.15 acres of wetlands. There are 39 proposed lots. There'll be a large outlot containing the stormwater ponds, and that outlot area is also the green space as a part of their planned unit development greenway requirements. Next. These are the lot widths and depths and the general lot requirements. They're doing it as a planned unit development, so the lots are a little bit smaller. They do not gain any extra density by making the lots smaller. It just allows for more efficient use of the property, and then also provided the city with that green space area. Next slide. The road will be a continuation of Goodwin Lane. It'll connect with Goodview Avenue. There'll be a clustered mailbox, and there'll be street signs that will be applied also. Next slide. They'll be creating a stormwater pond and an infiltration basin. There's also a wetland. There'll be the overflow. They will be impacting that smaller wetland with a couple of the lots and the pond area. I misspoke during the planning commission meeting. There's a different wetland impact that had been approved. This one has not been approved yet. Next slide. The landscaping, it is a treed lot. The ordinance does allow permitted tree removals from the street areas, stormwater, within 15 feet of the building, the driveways. Those are permitted removals. So there are a number of trees that are permitted to be removed. There are, I think on the next slide, on this slide, there's 40 overstory trees that'll be planted and 306 understory trees as a replacement plant for those trees. So that landscape plan you can see there, you can see the trees that are planted along the outside edges along the street area. Next slide. And this is just the current woodland area. So tree removal to remove are 637 exempted trees and 36 non-exempted. So the exempted would be the ones that they could remove because they're areas that development is going to happen. To be planted for replacing the 78 total trees, meeting the preservation requirements. Next slide. So staff and the planning commission are recommending approval of the conditional use permit for the planned unit development plan. The next resolution is for the preliminary plat. Planning commission is also recommending the approval of that. There are a list of conditions for both that are listed on the resolution and in your packets. Are there any questions?
All right. Council, do you want to start with us questions, or should we allow the residents that are here to speak to talk?
I'd rather have them speak, and then we might come up with more questions.
Okay. All right. So we're in agreement. You're good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's start with Todd and Nancy. Is it Brockman? Am I saying that correctly? Yep. Come on up. State your name and your address, please.
I am Nancy Brockman. I'm at 25678 Goodwin Road. So I'm basically going to talk about the same thing I probably talked about last week at the Planning Commission, but a couple of things that were on the permit worksheet that I just want to bring forward. When it talks about the appearance of the into the adjacent lots, you know, that is going to change the way it is out there right now. Our lots are, you know, acre and a half. You're going to be putting housings on top of our housing lots. We like it larger lots out there. We like to mow lawns out there. We like our space. That's why we move out into that area. The city of Wyoming website, you know, you state that as our community grows, we must have our commitment to protect and improving the quality of water resources. Wetlands help make the city of Wyoming one of our area's most livable communities. So I'm asking you guys to help, please protect these wetlands in this area. Wildlife is huge. There's a lot of species out in that area. To just take it down to put in another housing development that could go somewhere else, it really is just devastating. I can't say that enough. Putting in another road, there's already, you know, issues with keeping up with the road upkeep the way it is out in our area. Putting in another one that's gonna have to be upkept. I mean, it'd be nice if the ones out in our area were kept up already and not just patched. You're gonna have fences up, it's just gonna change the dynamic right now. It's pretty open, you know. We're gonna be sitting there looking at neighbors in our backyards with a whole different dynamic. We're gonna have a lot more dogs running, kids running. Right now, it's a nice, quiet community there. It's the reason we moved into this area, out of the city, to have larger lots. And so to have small lots like this being put in into a small cramped area of wetlands, is just something that we don't wanna see.
Thank you. Mr. Linwood, could you put the picture back up of the development, the wooded lot, I'm gonna call it the Google map one, but whatever it is. Nope, keep going. The first one that shows with the lots and the trees, the actual photograph of it. That one, thank you. If you could just keep that up for a few minutes, please.
Can you
Okay.
expand that?
I can't, unfortunately.
Okay.
Do we have anyone else who'd like to come up and speak?
Oh, thank you.
No one else? Okay, state your name.
Hello, council, I'm Dan Iverson, 25675 Goodwin Road, Wyoming. And also a member of the planning commission. I happen to vote no on this one, and I just wanted to give a little reason why. As a member of the planning commission, I'm asked to evaluate these conditional use permits on different merits of the permit. And there were three that personally I questioned. And the first one is on, this is according to the Chapter 40, Article 5, Division 6, Conditional Use Permits, Section 40-112. The first condition that I personally questioned was the use will be sufficiently compatible or separated by distance or screening from adjacent development or land so that existing development will not be depreciated in value and there will be no deterrence to development of vacant land. The second point that I questioned of the 12 or so conditions is the structure and site shall have an appearance that will not have an adverse effect upon adjacent properties, and I think that was brought up by the previous speaker here, the resident. And the third was the use will preserve and incorporate the site support natural and scenic features into the development design. I'm not personally seeing that. There's a lot of questions still around the design, the types of homes that'll go in there, et cetera. But I think it's also, I would say, just the density, putting smaller quarter-acre lots surrounded by an area of 1 to 2 acre lots seems to be kind of a postage stamp approach to, to land development. I'd like to see something a little more consistent, comprehensive approach. So, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else like to come up? Now's your chance. Anything you want to say? No? Jared? No? Okay, as I say, now's your time. We won't bite.
No, that's fine. Jared Wenzel, 25709 Goodview. That's that northwest house on the top of the map there. My wife and I got married in the backyard in October 1st. To piggyback off of, it's not going to change the landscape or the view of the surrounding houses is a lie. It's pretty obvious. You're going to make a development that looks like Himes Lake, and that's an open field. So why are we taking down 18 acres of forest to build a development to cram all these houses in? People moved up here to get away from city lots, and I think that was pretty apparent last week with everyone that showed up. I guess some questions I have is on that back part of my lot is also a wetland. I don't know how that is going to be affected with the new trail that's going to go back there, and that's not laid out.
Jared, did you say which
The
one's yours?
northwest, the left side.
The left,
Upper left hand.
upper left-hand corner, the long driveway? Is
Yep.
that what I'm seeing? Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry.
That wasn't in there. I know there's ducks and geese, countless other animals, foxes and deer. And that's one of the reasons why I actually bought that house back in June of 2020, I went and seen the house. There was 8 deer standing in the backyard. I grew up in Wyoming, so I've been here for 22 years. My parents live right behind the elementary school, so. I guess I don't really have much other questions than that,
Okay.
but I would also, is it Dennis Schilling?
Dennis is not here. Dan Iverson?
Oh, Dan Iverson, what he said about something that's consistent with what's already there. So I have 2.5 acres, the lot behind me is 1 acre and a quarter. So we're talking about putting, like inner city lots in with, you can reach out and touch the next house next to you. So it's pretty unsettling that's what we wanna go with, but.
Okay, thank you, and congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, anyone else? Last chance. No? All right, so we're gonna open it up to council. Thanks for everybody who came up and spoke. We'll open it up for questions to council. We do have the developer here, or just you're the developer, you're the engineer? Yes, okay. All right, would it be okay if you guys came up to the podium for council that'll have questions? I'm sure there'll be quite a few. Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna start with Member Onstead. Questions or comments?
I don't know who would answer this, but I have several questions. What would happen if we didn't approve of this tonight as it sits?
So this is for Attorney
Probably-
Lunan?
Probably, maybe the city manager?
Ultimately, in this instance, council sits as sort of the judge to determine whether or not the applicant has met the standards that have been adopted by the city. We've already adopted these standards with regards to the conditional use permit, with regard to the PUD. Any applicant looking to approve will bring that before the council. Your guys' position now is to review those applications, take into consideration, recommendations from staff who have also reviewed them, recommendation from planning commission, and make a determination as the ultimate decision maker if those standards have been met. If the council is inclined to deny, it must make findings as to which standards have not been met and why they have not been met. We must establish those we must establish those findings on the record and then also put them into writing if there's going to be a denial. Similarly, on an approval, we will have findings on approval as to why those standards have been met, and we feel that approval is necessary in this instance. Council, again, has the authority to make the decision that they deem is appropriate. But any applicant or any individual who feels aggrieved by the decision and feels that the council has made an incorrect decision or has not properly applied the standards does have the right to challenge those in court. And so in the event that there's a determination made, there will have to be a firm finding of fact as to approval or denial for the record. And then, depending on the application, those individuals do have the right to challenge that through the court of law, and then the city potentially ends up in litigation. So again, ultimately it's up to the council as to what decision they are going to make, but that decision could have consequences that obviously lead to potential lawsuits. Anything really further than that probably is a bit deeper than the scope, but I want to emphasize that if you deny it, then the development can't go forward. That's a determination, findings have to be established, and then that's the end of it unless the applicant chooses to challenge that decision from the city council. And I'm happy to answer further questions as I'm able, but also don't want to go too deep into, the consequences of litigation or what that may look like as well.
Okay, yeah, I'm concerned about the changing of the zoning to meet your needs. If the zoning doesn't change, do you have plans to cover that? Oh.
Yep.
Oh.
They're not asking for a rezoning, they're already zoned R3. So the planning and development isn't a request to rezone it or change the zoning. It's a request to make standards with some conditions. Basically, there's trade-offs. They're asking for, in essence, like smaller lot width, so they have less street frontage so less asphalt, less pipe per lot than what a normal lot size would require. So for that trade-off, then they're providing us with green space. So they're protecting that wetland in the upper left corner, creating a pond area, they're doing an outlot that no one has control of besides the homeowners association, so that can be never built on. But the zoning isn't changing.
So the zoning is basically already in place.
Already in place, and the lots aren't exactly what the R3 zoning is, but they're a mix of different ways of making that R3 zoning work. Trying to
Okay.
do this in as few words as I can, but basically they're taking a plan to make it work without increasing the density or changing the zoning on it.
And again, just to sort of reiterate, these are standards that the city has already adopted within the ordinance. The plan unit development, it's in the memo that staff prepared and also for planning. But the plan unit development, that's section 40-364, which talks about those standards. So again, as we're looking at this application or any land use application that's coming before the city council should be considering those standards and apply those standards to the application and making its determinations. So similarly here with the PUD, there is the standards that have been adopted, and that's where we should be looking as a council in making these decisions and making these determinations, which you're tasked to do here tonight.
Any
That's
other
all I have.
questions? Okay. Member Luker.
Okay, so just to reiterate, what criteria and input does the planning commission use to make a recommendation for development like this to city council?
Commissioner Lugar, first staff does the review. So they receive a staff report just like the city council does. So they're reviewing our work in essence. Staff is reviewing the application based on the ordinances and the standards that the city has adopted. The planning commission, in essence, does the same thing you are. They're acting as a judicial body to make a recommendation to you. So again, they have to do the same thing, address those same standards and do the same work that you're doing. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. So this is all consistent with city ordinances, our comprehensive plan, et cetera?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Weck, could you address Commissioner Iverson's 3 concerns on the 3 standards that he spoke to?
The first one, item number 3, sufficiently the use will be sufficiently compatible or separated by distance or screening from adjacent development or land, so the existing development will not be depreciated in value, and there will be no deterrence to development of vacant land. That standard is more written towards a commercial conditional use permit, but it does apply here. Sufficiently compatible, we're looking at single-family homes next to single-family homes. Lots are a little bit bigger, lots are a little bit smaller, but they're still sufficiently compatible. They're providing screening along the edges in the landscape plan, so they're trying to provide some screening, although the ordinance does not require any screening between residential uses. And there will be no deterrence to development of vacant land. This is vacant land. It could be developed differently, but under the standards that there's the zoning right now, this is what they could do. The more natural and scenic features. Some of these are subjective. It's one person's trash is another person's treasure. So I can't fault anyone. I moved in a big lot that has wooded lots behind me. They did that also. The issue is that they don't own that land, and eventually it's going to be developed in some way. And this is what the current owner is proposing.
Okay. For my part, I read the public hearing comments and the planning commission meeting minutes. I also drove by the proposed site this weekend during the Vikings game, which was a terrible idea. I personally believe in conservation. I believe in maintaining natural beauty and the habitats in our community. That said, to Mr. Lunen's point, this appears to be less of an opinion-based decision than really more one of how does the established criteria, how is that met? I grew up on Goodview, so I actually remember when none of those homes in the neighborhood existed. That was all forest, it was all land. But at some point, the land was developed, the houses were built, and now it's a neighborhood. And so, to me, our role here isn't just to consider the benefit of our tax base. It's also to consider how the preliminary plat fits within our ordinances, our code, and the Planning Commission's comprehensive plan. And I think it's been a pretty clear and transparent and very public process. Thankfully, we always appreciate input into how these, the decisions that get made here at City Council. And I would imagine that process is very similar to the process by which the current neighborhood exists as well. I think, to me, to cherry pick kind of what codes and ordinances and what frameworks we want to abide by, I think sets a bad precedent for future consideration of laws that we've already got on the books. And I think if we want to reconsider the framework by which the Planning Commission makes recommendations, then I'm certainly open to exploring that option. But I think given the current requirements, we do have that framework that we have to, it's less of what do I think about it and more what are our current laws on the books and what meets that criteria. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Member Yeager.
Okay. So the reason that, in the reports, this is being compared to R3 is despite having R1 surrounding this on three sides, is because it's already been zoned R3 many years ago.
I'm sorry, I'm missing the question.
Okay. I noticed that the setbacks, the front yard setbacks, the rear yard setbacks, they're all compared to R3.
Yes,
And that's because it's been already zoned R3 some years ago.
correct.
Because I thought that was a bit of an anomaly when it was the area surrounded by R1. Okay. Does the green space in Outlot A, does it consist of mainly of wetlands, a pond, and an infiltration basin?
That appears to be what a lot of it is. There's this one doesn't show the trees that'd be left, but along that northern edge, there'd be some trees that'd be still left in place.
Okay. Is any of that green space usable to the community?
There's a path that's going around the pond, so it's, it's not recreational as far as a baseball game, but no, it's a scenic area that, again, wildlife and the green space.
Kind of like the path that goes through Thornbeck?
Yes, in a way, but Thornbeck's a little bit different, but because it's.
There's a path that goes through that when the gentleman couldn't get, how to deal with his stormwater ponds and whatnot, he put a nature trail back there. So is this going to be similar to that nature trail?
There'll be
You
a
don't
trail.
know.
I
Okay.
don't know if it is what's shown on the drawing, I'm sorry.
Okay, who's going to be responsible for maintaining that path and the green space?
The outlot will be under control of the homeowners association. They'll be in charge of maintaining those ponds. There'll be an agreement with the city and the developer or the homeowners association for that.
Okay, will the landscaping in the areas that abut the existing homes be large or dense enough to totally screen them?
There are a lot of deciduous trees, so during the winter, probably not. It doesn't, but again, ordinance does not require screening between residential uses.
I know, but there are concerns. All right, and are you going to planning on putting anything in to screen the lots?
Well, I think there's a fair amount of trees right on there right now. Yeah, that's a pretty good buffer, it looks like to me.
Okay.
There'll be additional plantings, especially along that southern line there. So.
And how long will those additional plantings take to grow in? Well, for example, we got a little solar panel down over behind the school. I remember a couple of neighbors were like, I would really like this screened, and so they went in and they put these 6-foot trees, minimum size trees in, and those suckers will grow and screen it when the solar panels are ready to come out.
We haven't got that far as, I don't think that, we haven't got approval yet, but, you
Okay. And the gentleman, Jared, he compared the development to Himes Lake Villas. And he's the second one I've heard compare the development to what's in Himes Lake Villas. So why are we comparing to Himes Lake Villas? Because it does seem to me, even detached townhouses seem out of character with the neighborhood.
Mr. Webb?
Question came up during the planning commission meeting, what other planned unit developments has the city approved? And that's, I think, where they may have came up. The Himes Lake Villas, both the first one and the second one are planned unit developments. The Summerfield development is a planned unit development. Hawk Meadows was, Liberty Ponds was, quite a few developments were done as planned unit developments. So that was the example that I was trying to give, that, again, all these developments were granted the same type of.
Okay, well, it's just, they weren't talking about the types of houses that were going in there.
That I don't know. I'm not even sure if that's what the concern is, if it's the type of houses.
Okay.
The question came up as far as lots and planned unit developments and what the city had approved.
Now, is my understanding that these lots are bigger than Himes Lake Villas?
I think they're a little bit bigger. I couldn't tell you for sure without comparing them. I wasn't asked that question to do a comparison.
Okay. Huh. That said or asked.
The way we designed all of these was so that the lots were the widest for the villas that we needed, rather than 55, or what was the minimum that was needed? I think it's
70.
I can't remember, but
Up here, 9.
we've had opportunities to build three-car garages on these lots, so we made them wider. And I was thinking that would be a good thing for anybody, because the goal here was, we're debating between slab on grade for the older generation that is really a popular product right now. One level living, with three-car garages was my idea.
Okay. That asked. See, I'm not totally comfortable putting those itty-bitty quarter-acre lots in an area surrounded on 3 sides by 1-acre lots. And if those quarter-acre lots, over 80% of them are smaller than the R3 zoning that's across the street. Well,
Mr. Webb?
The lots across the street were also done as a planned unit development, so they don't meet the R3 requirements either.
okay. Because then I was also looking at the other developments that Mr. Weck cited. And these lots are being dropped in the middle of large lots, which could be disconcerting to people living around that. But the other developments, like for example, Himes Lake Villas, there's nothing there. There's no other residence unless it's way across Himes Lake, the other side of Himes Lake. Summerfields, they do have smaller lots, but they have a road and more distance between them, not dropped in the middle. Thornbeck, I said, I didn't, it was a long time ago when that went in, I didn't, How many of Thornbeck's lots do not meet the R3 requirement?
I do know that Mr. Schilling has the smallest lot in the development, and I know it's like about 8,000 square feet, if I remember right. I'd have to look again, but again, a lot of, there are some that are bigger because of how the lots were worked out, but again, it's a planned development.
I know the lots in Thornbeck, the ones adjacent to the scenic Ashton Lake, are bigger on the lakeside than they are across the street.
There's shoreline rules for those ones that are on the lake.
Right. So, concerned with that, but then on the other hand, We recently rezoned a property, we allowed a property in an R2 district to subdivide their lot to 2 smaller lots. So doesn't this not set a precedent, doesn't this set a precedent that we do allow smaller lots in areas of zoned for bigger lots?
Mr. Weck?
The one we just had with the 2-acre lot was rezoned to R1, so it, again, it met the requirements for that, although there were a couple of variances on that one. I'd like to remind the city council that the current comprehensive plan has this property in that R3 type zone, and the comp plan that's up for adoption tonight also has this property in that R3 type zone.
Mr. Lunan, does this, you were about to say if it's set a
Yeah, I would just further
precedent?
emphasize that we're not necessarily concerned about precedent in this instance. With these land use applications, each application is to be looked at on its own merit in applying those standards. And ultimately, in the past, the hope and the belief is that the council properly applied the standards if they weren't challenged. And similarly here, it's just an application of the standards as to this application and what the council deems approval. I do also just want to take a quick moment, something to point out, because I didn't point it out before, but tonight we have 4 council members, and that presents an opportunity for a 2-2 tie. And with a land use application, and in this instance, as it's written on the agenda, the recommendation to a motion for approval, which is the assumption that the motion would be made, you certainly are entitled to do a motion for denial. But either way, let's assume that it's a motion for approval that's made here tonight. In the event of a 2-2 tie, if the 2 members voting against approval sufficiently state reasons for denial, that would be considered a denial of the application. If reasons of denial are not properly stated on the record, we would likely revisit this in January. But just procedurally, I wanted to point that out because we do put ourselves in a position with 4 members that a tie creates kind of a unique situation. And there are instances, if denial and the factors of denial are clearly stated by those 2 members voting in denial, that would be considered a denial. If it's not clearly stated, again, we would revisit it then at the next meeting to potentially entertain a motion for denial, although then we would likely be at full strength as a body. But I did want to point that out, just given the circumstances with the even number of council members here.
Thank you. Any other questions?
If we were to deny, what would their findings of fact be?
Don't know. Don't know.
And I will emphasize, you don't have to necessarily deny tonight. I've confirmed with zoning administrator Weck that we don't have to take an action tonight. We are coming up on the 60-day deadline, but we do have opportunity for an extension to potentially look at this a little bit further. But again, if approval or denial, there need to be findings
It's a fact.
relevant to the the standards that the city has. And so, but don't feel like if the council's leaning toward the denial, if it's going to be a 2-2 denial, whatever it may be, don't feel like you have to figure out those factors here tonight, because we can revisit this in January if necessary.
Okay,
Any more questions?
that's all I had.
Okay. I have several. Couple things that I want to ask first. I did Google your company. Do you have any other developments? I didn't see any.
No, not, the only other one that I did was in Otsego,
Okay.
and it was with another builder of mine. I'm a flooring contractor,
Yep, I read that.
okay? And I work with a number of different builders.
Okay.
And I purchased this property when the economy was in,
2008 or 9?
yeah,
One of those,
bad
okay.
shape.
Mm-hmm.
And just been waiting for the right time, and the right time, I think, is pretty close to now, with exception that our economy is slowed down right now with the interest rates and the housing prices that are up a little bit, but my goal would be having plat approval so that when the building time comes again, that we're ready and we don't have to wait however long this procedure takes.
Okay. And my another question would be, you know that the surrounding neighborhood is all 1.2 or more acreage, right? All the surrounding on 4 sides. what made you think about putting in this type of development in the middle of a development that is bigger acreage?
Well, I think, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know.
Brian, you're the engineer?
Yeah, I mean, the surrounding, correct me if I'm wrong, all the surrounding lots are all septic and well.
Yes.
And
Yep.
this is, you know, sewer and water was extended to the site.
Yeah.
It was set up for this type of development, which, you know, most typically are smaller lots. You can't, usually isn't feasible to develop 1-2 acre lots with sewer and water and all the utilities. It's just too expensive, so. So following this zoning with the PUD, I mean, it's just, I think it creates a better project all around. I mean, you're able to preserve the open space and still, again, like they stated, we're not gaining additional lots. I mean, you could come in and plat this thing with big lots, you would still probably clear more of the land to get those lots in. I mean, I think this is the right way to develop with this zoning here, so.
Sure, and in 2008 then, I mean, we just put in city sewer and water in 2015, 16?
17. I believe.
17, time flies. And so you had thought about having this development the whole time, because otherwise you would not have paid to put that stub in there for city sewer and water, correct? So it wasn't ever kind of a thought that it would be bigger lots?
I might clarify something.
Yeah, please.
Fred probably knows more about this than even I do. This was started as Katie's Glen way before I bought the property. And it had, at that time,
Say 45, 6 lots?
I don't know how many lots were on it exactly at the time, but it was already set up like this, stubbed into the road that's coming from the north to Goodview. And I thought, oh, great, well, there was a problem. Mark
From WSB? Yeah, Paul's here. Paul might,
There was a problem with that wetland, I think, and the wetland wasn't big enough to handle the stormwater runoff.
I think they were trying to use the
or
natural.
whatever they did, so they said to the developer at that time, hey, you're gonna remove a few lots and put more stormwater runoff. You can correct me if I'm wrong, that's how I understood it. And he kinda said, take it or leave it, and they left it, and then he lost it.
yeah,
And so that's when I came in and just purchased the land in a bad economy, and so I'm trying to now go through and work with, I've got 3 different builder contractors that I wanted to show them that I've got a plat approval. What do you guys think, you know, and that's where I'm at with it.
okay, and the builders that you have, what are you looking for family? Are you still looking for senior living? 3 cars for senior livings, wouldn't want 3 cars when I'm of a certain age, so just
Well,
curious onto that.
I think there's a lot of use for senior living right now, and I mean, let's say 55 plus. And one level living has really gotten to be a popular product, and I think these type of developments are popping up all over, not just Wyoming, but other cities and stuff. Because it's land is not getting any cheaper, and they're trying to figure out how to make that work. And then do the one level living thing, which is really popular right now, and I do a lot of them.
Okay.
For a number of different builders.
Yeah.
I do the flooring in them, I should say.
Okay. And you know that there's a silo on there and 3 wells and all that kind of stuff in that property, right? You're aware of that?
Yeah, that's gotta come down.
Okay. Okay, so you're aware of, and it was farm property. Fred, you might have to be able to answer this. Do you have to do tests and all that kind of stuff before they can build to, like if there's oil and,
I think all the buildings are on the lot that's not being developed, the lower southwest corner. So the rest of this has been wooded. I don't think there's anything there to really look at. And the silo typically just holding corn or silage, so there's nothing
okay.
there.
But we're not quite sure what might be buried down there. Who knows?
No, who knows?
Right? We don't know.
The lot wasn't large, or the development isn't large enough to require
Yeah.
DAW or anything like that, so.
Okay, sounds good. And then, Fred, you made a comment, Mr. Weck, you made a comment about one of the wetlands not, hasn't been met yet. What was that comment again on that? I'm trying to find it.
During the planning commission meeting, when it came up about the wetland impacts, I had just received the notice of approval for a different wetland impact,
Oh.
and I thought it was this one.
Okay.
So they still
Okay.
need to
They
get through
still
that
need to go
process.
through that.
Yeah.
So even with that being said, we don't have all of the information. It's still okay to be able to proceed when we don't have that information, is what you're
Yeah.
saying? Okay. To the builders, I'm all for PUDs. Every vote I've ever made, for PUDs. What concerns me, and I know we have ordinances and all that, I get that. What concerns me is this is different for the fact that they're all around that whole entire piece of property is acre and a half land, right? And so can you understand maybe how some of the residents might be fighting this, right? Because, you know, I will tell you it doesn't change my view, but I live a street down, right? So all transparency, doesn't change my view. But I get concerned about, and I get ordinances, I know what Attorney Lunan is saying on that. I get that. Is there any way that you would ever consider making those lots a little bigger? I guess I'm that person that likes to meet in the middle. So would you consider, because I would think, you know, I would think this, that you could probably find people that would want a little more land than from here to my, right, looking at somebody. So I like to kind of try to meet in the middle, that's why I'm asking. Would you consider trying, I know you've spent a lot of money and trying to
Well-
put that all together, but is that something that you might consider?
I think we're about as, I mean, right now with all of the extra things that are in here, it's really gotten way more expensive than I thought it was
Mhm.
gonna be,
Yeah,
to be honest.
and there's a lot of trees you gotta take down too.
And there's a lot, it's getting to be a little bit bigger deal than what I was anticipating
Yeah.
at first. We started out with more lots.
Yep.
And then we opened up more
Green
open
space.
space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the people to the north, especially to the north, are gonna really benefit by the more open space, and the extra basin in there. And then, there's only a couple houses that butt up to the project on the east side, on the northeast corner.
Mr. Linwood, could you
Um,
bring that picture back up again? I think everybody knows I'm a little dimensionally
And then everybody
challenged,
else-
so I'm not
Yeah.
afraid to say that.
I'm just starting with the north.
Yeah.
side here, but, and it looks like they're plenty deep, the lots, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, the biggest thing we can do is additional screening, and we understand that. But I think all the roads are stubbed in and all the lots have to be in here. I'm
Okay.
sure that's
Okay.
a feasible option.
Okay. And I'm not seeing any sidewalks.
I mean, there isn't sidewalks in the next adjacent development to.
We don't have sidewalks in
Right.
that whole development. There are no sidewalks, which
Yeah.
is concerning, because that's one of the things that the council has worked on is walkability within our developments, and many of them are putting sidewalks in. I do get concerned where Goodview Park is, and if you're doing family versus senior living, I don't see the seniors walking too much over to Goodview Park, but I do worry that there's not walkability into that. So that's a concern. It doesn't have to be there. I'm just stating that. So I think as a community, we're trying really hard to do walkability.
I
Right.
think that was discussed early on, but since there wasn't sidewalk in place in the adjacent developments.
Yeah.
that was-
Yeah, before my time, before I really wanted walkability, so. Okay. I think what needs to happen right now is based on comments, I would like to move to table this. And I would like to have a full council on this, to talk about it and to really look at this, because if there are some planning to vote no, then to Mr. Lunan's point, there has to be stated reasons why that doesn't fit in there, right? I'm in agreement with Member Yeager that at some point in time, if this does go forward, I really want Planning Commission to take a look at what our ordinances are, because this many houses set in the middle of a development is the first one, right? And I understand we have to go by what we already have. So I would like to make a motion, unless you guys have anything else you want to say. I want to give you that chance to. Okay, all right. So I'd like to make a motion to table this until we have full council.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Is council allowed to put in extra conditions on this? Like if we wanted to put in a condition for enhanced screening?
Council can approve, and with any conditions, those conditions will need to be reasonably related. If council's inclined to go with a table, it might be helpful to direct staff to look at those additional conditions if we're gonna be coming back here anyway. But yes, council, in their approval, have the right to pass conditions. Those conditions need to be related, and could be challenged. You know, staff has sort of vetted the ones that they've recommended, but you do have the right to impose additional conditions on an approval.
Okay. Would you guys be open to enhanced screening?
Well, I think we have some on there already, but yeah.
Well, I know
No,
you
I'm
have
just-
some
yeah, I
on
mean,
there.
we've
Would you
already
be open
kinda
to
tried
more?
do that here, but yeah, we could certainly talk about that further.
Okay.
And I know I would feel more comfortable knowing about all the wetlands and everything that's going on there, that I want to make sure that we get the findings for that wetlands, that it's good to go before anything gets approved as well. I mean, that's super important. There are bear back there, believe it or not. There's bear and deer and mice or whatever else is back there, so. But I would feel more comfortable too, knowing that we have all the approval that's necessary as well. So this gives us time. So I would like to make a motion that we, let me get to the right thing here, that we table resolution 22-12-129, a resolution approving a conditional use permit. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have second by member Onstead. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we will table it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh, Mr. Webb.
Second resolution.
Oh, well, it'll be this, all right, second resolution. All right. Number 13, to consider resolution 22-12-131, a resolution approving the preliminary plot of Katie Glen D 220016 location, Goodview Avenue between 255th, 258th Street. Applicant Perbuda Enterprises, property ID number 21-10140.00. Can I table this as well?
Mayor, you called it resolution 22-12-131, and I think it's 130.
Oh, sorry, yes. Resolution 22-12-130. Thank you. I would like to move to table this as well. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by member Onstead. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's tabled as well. So we'll probably see you back in January. Okay. Number 14, to consider an update of the long-term plan financial update for the city of Wyoming by Abdiv Financial. Mr. Linwood?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Well, can you hold on one second? If anybody else, now we just have regular business. If you'd like to stay, great. It will be a lot of fun. If not, if you'd like to leave, that's okay too. We will not be offended. Have a good night. Merry Christmas.
Thanks for coming out.
We sure do know how to clear out a place. So, all right.
Okay. Mayor, members of the council, tonight we are presenting you with a second iteration of the long-term plan. I think this is an important component that has been added to the city as far as a financial resource. Beyond our annual budget cycle, this is in our multi-capital year plan. It's our need to identify long-term financial trends. Long-term financial and planning involves projecting revenues, expenses, and key factors that have a financial impact on our organization. Understanding those long-term needs, it can potentially remove risk factors and impact overall our financial sustainability that allows our finance director and our staff and our city council to make strategic thinking and really to look at those long-term objectives and really look at that overall financial literacy within our organization. The council has made this commitment to our long-term financial plan, and then we have received, like I said, a long-term plan prior to this one. It is a living document, which we have discussed before. It really is a roadmap to empower you and our staff to help make good decisions. ABDO has worked with our city staff to compile the accompanying document in our forecasted long-term plan that includes property tax, tax rate, cash balances, and debt projections based on that input. That projection incorporate estimates through December 31st, 2027. This has been compiled by both a lot of our staff at ABTO and was done with the established American Institute of Certified Public Accountant Standards. Vicki Halthos of ABDO Financial is with us tonight, and she will be doing a presentation to the City Council, and then we can, if the council has any questions at the end, we'll have an ability to ask those. So with that, I'll let Ms. Halthos take over.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council.
Good evening.
It sounds like my audio may be a little loud on your end. We doing okay now?
Yes.
Happy to be with you this evening to walk through the 5-year long-term plan that our team put together. Just to let you know as well that Jesse Sturts is on the call. So I'm going to walk through a few key elements of the long-term plan and then open it up for any questions from the City Council. So just to start out, and again, just to kind of reiterate what Administrator Linwood mentioned is the long-term plan really is intended to be a fluid document. We capture things at this particular point in time, and so I'm going to touch on some of those key assumptions tonight that are built into this iteration of the long-term plan. But ultimately, this is something that we're going to maintenance annually. And based on ever-changing needs within the community, growth and development that's happening, changes in infrastructure priorities, the plan will be updated to mirror that. So with that being said, just kind of kicking things off, I think it's helpful to highlight that there are about 12 funds that the city budgets for capital equipment or other improvement needs within. So we've modeled out 12 different funds within this long-term financial plan. Tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit on the 3 key summaries. So the summary of property taxes, the summary of the city's overall cash position, and the summary of the city's debt portfolio. And then I'm going to take you, I'm going to walk you through one of the funds in particular, just so that you can see the flow of the overall document, and then hit on some graphical illustrations that we include within the report as well. So those are the things that I'm going to walk through with you tonight. So to start out, it is helpful for the council to take a look at the different major assumptions that are included within the report. So you can see on the left-hand side of my screen some of the different trend ratios that we use in terms of revenues and expenditures, assumptions that we make about the median home value within the community and how much growth and development is anticipated to happen through the duration of this plan. But then over on the right-hand side of my screen, I'm going to hit on these a little bit before we go into the financials. So overall, we attempt to model the general fund so that it continues to maintain adequate reserve levels. And so we try to target right around 5% annual levy increases in order to do so. Again, the goal is to keep that fund balance within 35 to 50% of budgeted expenditures to align with the OSA's recommendations. And so that's one of the major objectives we want to achieve as we model out the city's 5-year finances. The plan does also factor in bonds for 2 facilities projects, the City Hall facility project in 2023, and then the Public Works I have those flipped around, the Public Works facility project in 2023 and the City Hall facility project in 2025, as well as the street replacement project in 2025. We do also model in anticipated financing for a ladder truck purchase in 2025 as well. A couple things that we know with regard to the city's debt portfolio is that 2 of the city's bonds are going to be repaid in the coming years, both the 2009 bonds and the 2015 bonds will be repaid. Both of those will create some leverage and some capacity as you layer in potentially new debt for those projects. So I'm going to hit on the overall tax levy summary in just a moment, but over the duration of the plan, again, this point in time look shows the tax levy increasing from about 4.4 million to 7.7, and some fluctuation within the tax rate. Again, being a very fluid document and being in a community that's having a lot of growth and development, this will be annually re-indexed and adjusted based on the tax capacity growth the community is anticipated to see. It's helpful for you to know that your water and sewer funds that we've incorporated in the analysis that was done by Baker Tilly in terms of how we're projecting out future revenues in those funds, as well as in the surface water fund as well. Overall, what you'll see is the city's cash position will remain strong. We will see an overall decrease over the life of the plan, and that's just essentially based on utilization of some reserves for different capital needs as we go. Then it's also helpful to know that the city did conduct a park and trail master plan in 2022. At this point in time, with this iteration, we do not have incorporation of an annual tax levy to fund that plan. And so this may be something that we take a look at with management and the city council when it adjusting this plan and setting budgets in future years. And then finally, we are waiting on some additional information regarding the city's municipal state aid funds for street projects. So there is some possibility of an advance, and that may influence the timing of projects. So it's just kind of helpful to know that there are some elements related to that that are a bit more fluid in the document as well. So with that said, I'm now taking you to the very first high-level summary that's included within the document, and this is the city's overall property tax levy schedule. And so having just walked through the budget process a couple of weeks ago, all of this is very familiar to us in that, on the top, we kind of have the levies for the operating funds, which are the general fund and the EDA. Right below that, we have property tax levies for all of the, right below that, we have property tax levies for the city capital funds. The funds that we're depicting a property tax levy for would be the capital equipment fund, the park acquisition fund, as well as street replacement and capital revolving. Just below that, you'll see the property tax levies for debt service. And then right about in the middle of the page is where you see assumptions for tax base related to new growth and development occurring within the city. And then we project out what that future tax rate could look like should all of these scenarios play out over the next 5 years. Switching gears then a bit to look at the cash summary, this is these dashboard indicators are something we like to see. You see a lot of green on this page. And so what that tells us is that the plan is ensuring that cash balances remain positive, taking into consideration any reserve levels that are needed, particularly in the general fund. And what you see in a couple of the years, for example, 2023, we have a high point in that cash balance, and that's really just reflective of the fact that we're bringing in those bond proceeds for some of those major projects and then spending those down as the projects are completed. The last high-level summary that's included within the plan is a summary of the city's overall debt portfolio. And what I'll turn your attention to here is the middle section. This is the potential new debt section where I referenced before the bonds related to the street project, a couple of facilities projects, as well as that equipment certificate for a ladder truck that's contemplated. So I mentioned that I wanted to take you through at least